She was only 3 years old the first time she tried to stand all on her own, but nobody saw her do it. Nobody heard the tiny shuffle of her feet on the cold floor, or the soft thud of her hand against the wall as she balanced herself in the shadows. Nobody believed she could do anything like that, not at her age, not with how quiet she always was, not with how she seemed to understand things a child shouldn't be able to understand. And yet she did. People used to say she was born different. Not dangerous, not strange in a scary way, just different. The kind of difference you can't fully describe, but you feel it when she walks into a room, or when she stares a little too long, as if she's seeing something behind you. Something you can't see. Her name was Lila. And from the moment she learned how to sit up, she preferred the dark. Her parents didn't think much of it in the beginning. Babies like shadows, right? They sleep with their eyes half open sometimes. They stare into corners for no reason. They laugh at things adults can't see. But Lila wasn't doing the normal baby things. She wasn't giggling or reaching for toys or babbling like she should have. Instead, she stared. She stared into the darkest parts of the room, the places where the light didn't reach, the places her father used to joke were too black to be real. But Lila watched those corners like something was living there. Her mother used to try to pick her up and turn her around so she wouldn't look that way. "Look over here, sweetheart," she'd whisper softly. "Look at Mommy. Look at the light." But Lila never did. She didn't cry. She didn't fuss. She didn't blink. She just stared. And every time her mother turned her away, Lila would twist back. Slowly. Silently. Always facing the dark. Nobody talked about it outside the house. Not because they were embarrassed, but because they were afraid that speaking it aloud would make it real. They didn't want to seem like the kind of parents who worried too much. They didn't want people thinking something was wrong with their daughter. And deep down, they didn't want to admit something felt off. Her father said it was just a phase. Her mother said it was imagination. Her grandmother said nothing at all. She only crossed herself and whispered prayers whenever she thought nobody was listening. The house was old, older than most homes in the neighborhood. It had thick walls and wooden floors that sighed when you walked on them. The windows rattled when the wind blew too hard, and the pipes hummed at night like something was whispering through the walls. But it was a good house, a strong house, the kind of house that felt like it had its own heartbeat. And people who visited always said the same thing. "It's a little dark in here, isn't it?" Not dark as in poorly lit. Dark as in heavy. Like something unseen was pressing down on the space. Lila loved it. When she turned 3, everything changed. The strange staring stopped. The long hours of silence stopped. And for a little while, her parents thought she was becoming more normal. Except that was the same week she started walking. Nobody taught her. Nobody held her hands or encouraged her or cheered her on. She just got up one night. Quietly. As if she'd been waiting for the right moment. As if someone had told her it was time. Her mother found her the next morning, standing in the doorway of her room. But the strange part wasn't that she was standing. It was that she was facing the hallway. The dark hallway. "Lila," her mother whispered softly, rubbing her eyes. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" Lila didn't turn around. Her little shoulders rose and fell with slow breaths. She wasn't scared. She wasn't shivering. She wasn't confused. She was calm. Too calm for a child her age. Her mother knelt beside her and reached out to touch her shoulder, but the moment her hand brushed Lila's arm, the child took a small, steady step forward. Into the dark. Her mother gasped and grabbed her, lifting her up. Lila's body was warm, her heartbeat steady, but her eyes were wider than usual, almost glowing. Not glowing like light, but glowing with understanding. Like she'd done something she wasn't supposed to do, and she knew it. Her mother called for her husband, and soon they were both hovering over Lila, talking softly, trying to understand how their daughter had stood up and walked without waking them. But Lila didn't look at them, not even once. Her little head was turned back toward the hallway, her gaze locked on the dark space she had been heading toward. Her father touched her cheek. Her mother kissed her forehead. But Lila didn't respond. She kept looking into the shadows. Later that day, after breakfast, after cartoons, after a nap she didn't seem to need, her father tried to place Lila upright on the carpet to see if she would walk again. She did. And this time, she didn't walk toward the hallway. She walked toward the darkest corner of the living room. Her tiny bare feet patted softly across the floor, her arms steady at her sides, no wobbling, no hesitation. She stopped right at the edge where the sunlight faded and the shadows deepened. And then she lifted her hand, slowly, gently, almost like she was reaching for someone. Her father felt a chill run through him. "What is she doing?" he whispered. Her mother didn't answer. She couldn't. Because Lila wasn't reaching for a wall. She wasn't reaching for a toy. And she wasn't reaching for nothing. Her hand was moving like she was waiting for someone to take it. But there was no one there. That night, her parents locked her bedroom door for the first time. Not because they wanted to keep her in, but because they were scared about her wandering into the hallway again. They told themselves it was just a precaution. Kids walk around at night, they get hurt, they fall downstairs, they grab things they shouldn't. This was normal, just responsible parenting. But Lila's reaction wasn't normal. She didn't cry when they closed the door. She didn't call for them. She didn't try to open it. She just stood in the dark behind the wooden door, quiet and still. Her parents could hear her breathing, soft and slow, like she was waiting. They left the hallway light on. They checked the baby monitor twice. They agreed they were overreacting. But at 3:12 a.m., her mother woke up without knowing why. Something felt wrong. She nudged her husband awake and whispered, "Go check on her." He groaned, tired, but got up. The hallway felt colder than usual. The door to Lila's room was shut, just like they had left it. He placed his hand on the doorknob, hesitated, and then pushed it open slowly. It was pitch black inside. He reached for the light switch. But before he touched it, something moved in the dark. Something small. Something quiet. Something standing. Her father froze. "Lila," he whispered. No answer. Only the soft sound of breathing. Not scared breathing. Not crying. Steady. Calm. Close. Too close. He fumbled for the switch and turned on the light. Lila was standing right in front of him. Not crying. Not confused. Not sleepy. Standing. Straight. Balanced. And smiling. Not a normal toddler smile. A knowing smile. A smile that felt older than she was. Her father dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. How did you get up?" Lila didn't speak. She rarely spoke at all. Not because she couldn't. Because she didn't want to. He lifted her, placed her gently into bed, and tucked her in. But her eyes never left the hallway. Not once. That was the first night she stood on her own. But it wasn't the last. Over the next week, things got weirder. She started moving objects without making sound. She opened doors her parents swore they had locked. She wandered into rooms she had no reason to go into. And sometimes, late at night, they heard her humming softly from the darkness. Not a random tune. A melody. A pattern. Like she was copying something. Or someone. Her grandmother visited on the 8th day. She wasn't told anything. She wasn't given details. She wasn't warned. But the moment she stepped inside, her smile faded. "She's been walking, hasn't she?" she whispered. Her mother froze. Her father tensed. How did you know?" The old woman didn't answer right away. She stepped carefully toward the hallway. The same hallway Lila always stared at. She placed her hand on the wall, closed her eyes, and let out a shivering breath. "It's darker than it should be," she murmured. "This place, this house, something is watching her." Her father scoffed. "Mom, don't start with that." But her grandmother turned slowly toward him, her expression tight and serious. She didn't learn to walk alone. Silence filled the air. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "What do you mean?" her mother whispered. Her grandmother swallowed hard. She had help. The moment the old woman said it, a soft sound came from the hallway. A tap. A tiny footstep. Too light to belong to an adult. Too steady to belong to a 3-year-old. 3 heads snapped toward the dark. Her grandmother crossed herself again, her voice trembling. She wasn't alone that night. And then the lights flickered. Just once. But enough for them to see a small figure standing at the end of the hallway. Not Lila. Lila was behind them, clinging to her mother's leg. This figure was the same height as Lila. The same shape. The same silence. But it wasn't her. It couldn't be her. Because even in the flicker, its eyes were wrong. Pitch black. Like two missing pieces of its face. And when the lights came back fully, the figure was gone. Her father grabbed Lila. Her mother screamed. Her grandmother whispered prayers so fast her words blurred together. They searched the whole house, room by room, corner by corner, but found nothing. No footprints. No signs of an intruder. Nothing. But that night, Lila walked again. Not stumbling. Not holding the wall for balance. Walking. Confident. Purposeful. Straight toward the hallway. They tried to stop her, but she slid out of their hands like she knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't look scared. She didn't look confused. She looked like someone answering a call. And when she reached the same dark spot where the figure had stood, she raised her hand again. Slowly. Patiently. As if waiting for someone to take it. Her father rushed forward to pull her back. But Lila whispered something. A word so soft, so quiet they almost missed it. But they heard it. And it froze them completely. Because it wasn't a word a 3-year-old should know. It wasn't a name they had ever said in front of her. It wasn't something from TV or books or toys. It was something old. Something whispered in a language none of them recognized. Something that did not belong in the mouth of a child. And when she whispered it, the hallway light burned out instantly. Pitch dark. And in that darkness, something moved. Something breathing. Something waiting. Something that had been there long before Lila learned to walk. Her grandmother screamed for them to grab her. Her parents lunged toward their daughter. But before they could reach her, Lila took one confident step forward and disappeared into the dark. Her father didn't remember moving. 1 second he was frozen in place, staring at the spot where Lila had vanished, and the next he was lunging into the dark hallway with both hands out, grabbing nothing but cold, empty air. His breath came fast and shallow, echoing strangely in that small space, as if the walls were absorbing sound instead of letting it bounce back. He called her name again and again, louder each time, but his voice felt muffled, like it was being swallowed. Her mother flipped the light switch again and again, but the bulb stayed dead. No flicker, no spark, nothing. The hallway was thicker now, darker than before, almost like the dark itself had weight. Her grandmother fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight, and for a second, the beam cut through the shadows. But instead of lighting the whole hallway, it only reached a short distance before fading into black, as if something was blocking it. Her father took a shaky step forward, then another. He reached the point where Lila had disappeared and stopped. He held out his hand slowly, expecting to touch a wall or a door or anything that made sense. But his hand just hovered in midair. There was nothing. No closet. No doorway. No trapdoor. Just the same hallway they'd walked through 1,000 times. Except now it felt different. Wrong. Her mother started crying softly. Not loud sobs, just that quiet kind of crying that shakes your whole body. She can't be gone, she whispered. She can't just disappear. Her grandmother pressed a trembling hand to the wall, eyes closed, whispering words too fast and low to understand. She wasn't praying the way she normally did. This was something else, something older, something she hadn't said in years. Back up, she whispered sharply. Move away from the hallway. Her father shook his head, refusing to step back. I'm not leaving until I find her. You won't find her like this, her grandmother said. And if you step any farther, you might not come back either. Her father froze. He didn't believe in curses or dark spirits or anything supernatural. But the fear in her grandmother's voice was real. Too real. And for the first time that night, he felt something else under the fear. A warning. Her mother grabbed his arm gently. Let's turn on all the lights first. All of them. Please. They backed up slowly, step by step, until they reached the living room. Her grandmother turned on every lamp she could find. The room grew bright, almost too bright, but even with all the lights, the hallway behind them stayed darker than it should have been. They searched the rest of the house. Her bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, every corner, every closet. But Lila wasn't anywhere. And yet, her mother kept saying the same thing, over and over through trembling lips. I didn't hear the door. She didn't go outside. She couldn't have gone outside. And she hadn't. Every door was locked from the inside. Every window was shut. The alarm system was still armed. Nothing made sense. When they returned to the living room, her grandmother was sitting on the couch with her hands folded tight, thinking. Not panicking. Not searching. Thinking. Like she knew something the others didn't. Her eyes didn't leave the hallway. I didn't want to say anything before, she whispered slowly. But I felt something in this house since the day she was born. Her mother stared at her. What do you mean? Her grandmother hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Some children see things before we do. Some children are connected to things we aren't supposed to understand. Her father scoffed. Mom, this isn't the time. But she cut him off. She learned to walk without help. She wasn't talking like a normal child, but she understood things she should not understand. Babies don't stare at corners like that. Babies don't wake up at night and walk into places where the light won't reach. Her mother hugged herself. I thought she just liked shadows. Her grandmother shook her head slowly. No child likes shadows. Children run from the dark. They cry when you turn off the lights. But not Lila. She didn't just like the dark. She trusted it. A chill ran through the room, and the dark trusted her back. The house made a soft cracking sound, like wood settling. Her father turned sharply, scanning the corners. This is insane, he muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. She must be hiding somewhere. She's small, maybe she slipped behind furniture. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. He knew the way she had vanished wasn't normal. He had lunged forward in the same moment she took that step, and she was just gone. Not lightning fast. Not running. Just taking one calm step into a darkness that swallowed her. Her mother wiped her eyes, trying to breathe normally. Why would she go with whatever that was? Her grandmother looked at her with sad eyes. Because she wasn't afraid. That answer hit harder than anything else. Lila wasn't afraid. Not at all. Not that night. Not at 3 years old. Not in the dark hallway. Not when she walked toward a figure that should not exist. Her father sank onto a chair, running both hands through his hair. So what do we do? Just wait? Call the police and tell them our daughter walked into darkness and disappeared. We don't tell the police anything, her grandmother said firmly. Not yet. They won't believe us, and they'll waste time searching places she isn't. Her mother swallowed hard. Then where is she? Tell me where she is. Her grandmother looked toward the hallway again. Some places in this world have thin walls, thin boundaries. Old houses, especially. Older than we realize. Old enough that something on the other side starts to push through. Maybe it noticed her. Maybe it liked her. Maybe she heard it calling. Her father slammed his hand against the table. Enough. Just tell me if she's alive. Her grandmother closed her eyes. Yes, I believe she is. Her mother let out a shaky breath of relief. But then her grandmother continued. But she is not alone. Silence fell again. Her father stood up. I'm going back in that hallway. Her grandmother grabbed his arm. No, not yet. If you go in blindly, you might bring something back with you. Her mother whispered. So what do we do? We wait until morning, her grandmother said. Darkness is not on our side right now. When the sun rises, we'll search again. Whatever took her, whatever she followed, it won't be as strong in daylight. Her father paced, angry, helpless. And if it doesn't let her go? Her grandmother looked at the hallway one last time. Then we'll have to make it. The house creaked again. Something shifted in the shadows of the hall. Not moving toward them. Not moving away. Just watching. Her mother reached for her husband's hand. He squeezed it tightly. And all three adults stood there, staring into the same darkness Lila had walked into, knowing morning felt impossibly far away. But somewhere in that darkness, a tiny giggle echoed, soft, familiar, and not alone. The three adults froze, breath shaking. Her grandmother whispered the one thing none of them wanted to hear. She's laughing with something. And the house went quiet again, holding the night like a secret, refusing to give anything back. Her father didn't sleep at all that night. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the dark hallway like it might suddenly open up and give Lila back. Every few minutes he thought he heard another sound, soft tapping, a shuffle, a faint breath. But whenever he leaned forward to listen closer, the house went silent again, as if it was aware of his attention. Her mother paced the living room until her legs shook, then sat beside him, gripping his arm like she might fall apart if she didn't hold onto something solid. Her grandmother stayed near the hallway but didn't cross the threshold, whispering under her breath the way she did when she wanted protection from something unseen. The sun rose slowly, and even though the daylight brought some comfort, the hallway still looked darker than the rest of the house. It wasn't pitch black anymore, but it held onto the night in a way that didn't feel natural. When the first beam of sunlight finally reached the entrance of the hall, her grandmother let out a small breath, as if she'd been waiting for that moment. "Now," she said softly. "Now we look." Her father walked into the hallway first. The moment he stepped in, he felt something strange, like walking through air that was thicker, heavier. Not enough to stop him, but enough to make him slow down. The walls looked the same. The old wooden floor looked the same. But something felt off. A faint chill drifted along the ground, low like fog, brushing against his ankles before slipping away. Her mother followed him with trembling hands, touching the wall for balance. "Lila," she called gently. "Sweetheart, if you hear Mommy, please answer me." No response. Just quiet. They checked her bedroom again, even though they'd searched it twice the night before. They looked under her bed, behind the curtains, inside the small wardrobe. Nothing. They moved through the next room, then the next, checking every inch, hoping for a clue. But the deeper they went into the hallway, the more the atmosphere changed. The air wasn't cold anymore. It was stale, like a room that hadn't been opened in years. And even though both her parents were right beside each other, they felt strangely alone, as if the hallway stretched longer than usual. Her father touched the far wall and frowned. "This can't be right." "What?" her mother asked. "This wall feels off." He pressed his palm against it, expecting solid wood, but the surface felt warmer than it should, almost like something breathing behind it. Her grandmother reached them and placed her hand on the same wall. She closed her eyes for a moment. "This room wasn't always like this," she whispered. "Something changed." The parents exchanged worried looks. "Change how?" her mother asked. Her grandmother opened her eyes. "Your grandfather used to say this house had a thin side, a place where things from the past linger. When he first bought it, he mentioned hearing whispers at night, like someone talking through another room that didn't exist anymore. We all laughed at him. I didn't want to believe the stories he told." Her father frowned. "Why didn't you tell us any of this before?" "Because it stopped," her grandmother said. "It stopped long before you were born. I thought whatever was here had grown silent. I thought the house had settled." Her mother stared into the distance. "And now?" Her grandmother looked toward the dark corner where Lila used to stand and watch. "Now it's awake again." They moved back into the living room, needing the comfort of the sunlight. But even there, something was off. Lila's toys were scattered across the floor in a pattern they didn't recognize. They weren't thrown around randomly. They were lined up neatly, forming a winding path that curved toward the hallway. Her mother knelt and touched one of the toys with shaky fingers. "I didn't leave them like this." "Neither did I," her father added. Her grandmother crouched lower and studied them more closely. "These were placed here, not by accident." Her father stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. "Are you saying she came out again? In the middle of the night?" Her grandmother shook her head slowly. "No. This was done by something small, yes, but not Lila." The air in the room shifted suddenly, like a cold breeze swept through, even though the windows were shut. The sunlight flickered across the floor, dimming for just a heartbeat before returning. Her mother grabbed her husband's arm. "Did you feel that?" He nodded. "Yeah. Something just moved." They didn't know what to do next. Calling someone felt pointless. Who would believe a story like this? Who would understand that a child didn't simply vanish, that something in the house was shifting, breathing, watching? Her father decided to check the basement next. He didn't believe Lila was down there, but he couldn't ignore the possibility. The basement door creaked loudly when he opened it. A cold wave rose up from below, carrying the smell of damp concrete and old wood. He flicked the light switch. The bulb flickered twice before steadying. Her grandmother stood at the top of the stairs. "Don't stay down there long," she warned. But he didn't answer. He started descending slowly, each step creaking under his weight. The light from above shrank behind him. The basement felt larger than he remembered, like the shadows stretched farther than the walls. He scanned every corner. Empty shelves, boxes, a few old tools. Nothing unusual. Then, right as he turned to leave, he noticed something near the far wall. A small handprint, low to the ground, smudged in dust, the size of a toddler's. His heart tightened painfully as he touched it lightly. The print was fresh, too fresh. He swallowed hard. "Lila," he whispered, even though he knew she wasn't there. The basement suddenly felt colder, as if the temperature dropped instantly. The light above him buzzed sharply, then dimmed. A faint sound echoed behind him, just a tiny shuffle, like a small foot adjusting its balance. Her father turned so fast he stumbled. "Who's there?" But the basement was empty. The sound stopped. The air stilled. The silence pressed against his ears. He backed away slowly, not turning his back until he reached the stairs. Only when he stepped into the hallway again did he let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He closed the basement door gently. "She's been down there," he whispered. "Or something has." His mother-in-law nodded slowly, her face tight with worry. "She's not lost. She's just beyond our reach." His wife looked between them, her voice breaking. "But how do we reach her?" Her grandmother hesitated. "We don't force our way in. That's the one thing we must never do. If we push too hard, it could push back." Her father clenched his fists. "So what do we do? Sit here and wait?" Her grandmother looked toward the hallway again. "We pay attention. This thing wants something. It's not random. It showed itself. It let us hear her. If it wanted to hide forever, it would have." Her mother felt her throat tighten. "But why her? Why Lila?" Her grandmother didn't answer for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and heavy. "Because she sees things the way they do." Her father stiffened. "The way who does?" Her grandmother looked back into the dark hallway, her eyes trembling just slightly. "The ones who live on the other side of the quiet." And before anyone could say anything else, the hallway light flickered again, and a small shadow passed across the floor, moving just fast enough to disappear before they could see it clearly. But slow enough for them to know one thing. They were no longer alone in the house. The air inside the building felt heavier now, like something unseen was pressing down on every step they took. The echoes of their footsteps bounced off the old concrete walls. But sometimes there were extra sounds mixed in, soft taps, faint breathing, or a whisper that didn't come from any of them. It kept everyone tense, especially Darren, who had started glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. He didn't say anything, but his uneasiness spread through the group like static in the air. The deeper they walked, the stronger the strange pull became. It wasn't something they could describe. It wasn't a voice calling them or a shadow dragging them. It was more like the building itself wanted them to keep going. Even though their instincts told them to stop and turn back, something made them push forward, as if answers were just a little further ahead. Every now and then, Mia would pause and look around, her eyes narrowing as though she sensed something the others didn't. She held her camera low, though she hadn't filmed anything for the past few minutes. It wasn't fear. She just didn't want to give attention to whatever was lurking unseen. When they reached the long hallway with peeling paint and broken tiles, the temperature suddenly dropped. You could see their breaths fog slightly, even though it was warm outside. A soft vibration moved through the floor, almost like machinery running somewhere deep underground. The problem was this building had no power, at least none that should have been active. The mystery of it only raised more questions. Why was the floor vibrating? What was creating that faint electrical hum? And why did it get stronger each time they took another step? Jace slowed down first. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. His voice barely carried, yet it sounded too loud in the silence. They all nodded. The vibration grew stronger, and the hum turned into a low throb, like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. It didn't feel dangerous yet, just strange, but strange was enough to keep their nerves high. As they walked farther, a new detail appeared, faint markings on the walls. Lines, circles, symbols half scratched out, like someone had tried to erase them but didn't finish the job. Some were burned into the wall, some drawn with charcoal, some carved in deep strokes that must have taken serious force. The patterns looked random at first, but the more they saw, the clearer it became that the symbols repeated, almost like someone had tried to leave warnings or instructions. Mia crouched to look at the closest one. She didn't touch it, but she leaned close enough to study the pattern carefully. "These weren't here last time," she said. Her voice sounded hesitant, as though saying it made the situation more real. None of the others argued. They all remembered the last time clearly. The hallway had been empty except for debris and old rust stains. These markings were new, and that fact alone made their skin crawl. Even though fear crept into their movements, they kept walking. The suspense kept building with every new sound and every flicker of shadow. The hallway got darker, the ceiling lower, and the air thicker. When the hum from beneath them suddenly stopped, the silence hit like a slap. It was so quiet that even their breaths felt too loud. Something about the sudden stop made their hearts race harder. It felt unnatural, almost like the building was holding its breath with them. Jace pulled out his flashlight again, but the beam flickered, then dimmed. He smacked it lightly, and it brightened again. But something was off. The light seemed thinner now, like it didn't want to reach the walls or floor. They kept walking anyway, using instinct more than vision. And the further they went, the more the space around them felt wrong. Angles didn't line up, shadows stretched too long, and even their footsteps sounded different. Hollow, like the ground beneath them wasn't solid anymore. They reached an intersection where the hallway split into 3 directions. The left path looked warped, as if the walls were slowly bending inward. The right path was flooded with a cold blue glow leaking from somewhere deeper inside. The center path was completely dark, but a soft breeze drifted from it, carrying a faint smell, dust, old metal, and something else they couldn't identify. Darren pointed to the blue glow. "We should check that out," he suggested. But the tone in his voice didn't sound like curiosity. It sounded like hope, the desperate kind that comes from wanting to pick the least terrifying option. Mia shook her head. "No. Whatever is glowing like that isn't natural. Let's stay with the middle path." Jace agreed. Even though the darkness felt dangerous, at least it wasn't glowing for unknown reasons. They stepped into the center hallway. The darkness swallowed the light from their flashlights almost immediately, as if something invisible was feeding on it. With every step, the sense of tension tightened. Their footsteps no longer echoed. They barely made sound at all. It felt like the hallway itself was absorbing the noise, trapping it inside its walls. A faint shiver ran down Mia's spine. She didn't say anything, but her breathing grew quicker, and she kept scanning the darkness like something might jump out at any moment. The atmosphere was thick with suspense, and every tiny movement felt magnified. Even their own shadows looked wrong, bending oddly behind them. Then they noticed something ahead, something small, barely visible, like a shimmer in the dark. It wasn't a light. It was more like the air was bending around a shape they couldn't quite see. They approached slowly, their footsteps soft. The shiver in the air pulsed slightly, as though reacting to their presence. The tension hit its highest point yet, the kind that makes your heartbeat pound against your ribs. The shape grew clearer as they got closer. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an object. It was something else entirely. Something not supposed to be there, something that felt like the heart of the mystery they'd been chasing. They stood still, watching it shift and ripple like a mirage. And then, just when the suspense reached its edge, the air in front of them moved, an unseen force pulling back like a curtain being lifted. It revealed nothing yet, but it promised everything was about to change. The story paused on the very edge of its climax, holding them and the audience. in a breathless moment just before the truth began to unfold. The air seemed to fold inward as that invisible curtain pulled back, and for a moment none of them moved. It wasn't fear that froze them, it was something deeper. Like their bodies instinctively knew they were witnessing the start of something that wasn't supposed to happen. The shimmering shape ahead of them flickered again, but instead of becoming clearer, it stretched wider, almost as though the darkness behind it was peeling open. The space felt unstable, bending slightly like heat rising from asphalt, yet there was no warmth at all. Instead, a sharp cold pushed against their skin, hinting that whatever was coming wasn't friendly. Mia stepped forward slowly, keeping her eyes locked on the shifting air. She didn't raise her camera, didn't even try to document it. Her instincts told her that recording it might attract unwanted attention, like whatever this thing was could sense the focus of a lens. The others followed her lead, moving quietly, trying not to disturb the strange stillness around them. When they got close enough to feel the faint pull from the distorted air, the shimmer suddenly collapsed inward with a jolt. A low pulse rolled through the hallway. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure shift that pressed against their heads. Jace staggered slightly, gripping the wall to steady himself. Darren blinked hard, whispering something under his breath as the air settled again. But the hallway had changed. The walls behind them were no longer straight. They had moved, subtle, but enough that the group stopped in shock. It felt like the building itself had shifted while the shimmering distortion pulsed. The once narrow corridor now seemed longer, stretching deeper into a darkness that hadn't been there before. They weren't trapped exactly, but the path they arrived through no longer felt reliable. The place was rearranging itself. That was the second twist they weren't prepared for. Jace swallowed hard. Did the hall get longer? His voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and hearing it out loud made the tension spike again. Mia didn't look back. It did. It wants us to go forward. The way she said it made the others exchange uneasy glances. It wasn't that she believed the building was alive. She just sensed the change more sharply than anyone else. The shimmer returned again, this time behind them. A quick flash that disappeared before they could fully turn to look. The air snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight, and the faint hum from earlier returned. But now it was louder, deeper, almost like a warning or a countdown. The stakes rose instantly. Their situation wasn't just eerie anymore. It felt deliberately manipulated. They moved forward again, feeling the suspense coil tighter with each quiet step. The floor beneath them felt uneven, almost like the ground wasn't stable. Some spots were colder, others hollow. It reminded Darren of walking on ice, unsure which part might crack. None of them wanted to say it out loud, but they all felt the same thing. The place was reacting to them, adjusting like it was studying their behavior. When they reached the next section of the hallway, everything shifted once more. The walls widened suddenly, opening into a circular room they'd never seen before. It looked newly revealed, not dusty or broken like the rest of the structure. The air was clearer, the floor smoother, as if this chamber had been sealed until this exact moment. The sudden contrast made their nerves spike again, but something about the room pulled them in. In the center of the circular space was a faint imprint on the floor. At first it looked like a design or marking, but as they stepped closer, it became obvious that it wasn't worked into the floor, it was burned into it. A clean, precise scorch mark in the shape of a wide ring, with smaller lines crossing through it. The symbol was more detailed than the ones in the hallway, almost perfectly preserved. Mia crouched down, studying it with narrowed eyes. "This wasn't meant for us," she whispered. "It's for something else. Something that's supposed to come here." Jay stepped back immediately, his heartbeat loud in his ears. Or something that already did. The idea settled into the room like dust. The silence thickened again, and for the first time, they realized the humming had stopped completely. It made the moment even more unsettling. The building was quiet, too quiet, like it was waiting for something to happen. A soft tapping noise broke the silence. All three of them spun around at the same time, flashlights rising. The taps were slow, almost thoughtful, like someone knocking politely on the wall. They followed the sound as it circled the room, one tap at a time. They weren't sure if it was coming from inside the walls or right behind them. Every time they turned toward the sound, it shifted to another side of the room. It felt like something was pacing around them, deciding where to strike. Then the tapping stopped abruptly, followed by one single, sharp thud on the far wall. A long crack began forming across the smooth surface, stretching like a spiderweb. It widened slowly, and cold air leaked out from the inside, carrying the same metallic scent they'd noticed earlier. They backed away instinctively, but the room seemed to grow smaller as fear crept closer. The crack pulsed once, twice, then split open just enough to reveal a thin sliver of darkness behind it. Darker than the hallway, darker than anything they had seen in the building. The suspense was almost unbearable now. Their breaths shook, their thoughts raced, and their instincts screamed at them to run. But their legs didn't move. A faint shadow moved behind the crack, just barely visible. It wasn't shaped like a person. It wasn't shaped like anything familiar. It slid across the narrow opening with a smooth motion, like it wasn't walking but drifting. Whatever it was large. And it was awake. The stakes rose sharply. They weren't just dealing with a strange building or shifting walls anymore. Something else was inside, something that had been waiting behind that chamber wall, sealed away until the distortion reopened its path. And now, whatever it was, it had sensed them. The story edged even closer to its climax. The tension stretched tight as the shadow behind the crack slowly began to move again. The crack in the wall widened just a little more, releasing a cold breath of air that felt older than the building itself. Mia's light shook in her hand, catching the shifting shadow behind the opening. It moved forward slowly, as if deciding whether to reveal itself or stay hidden. Every second stretched longer, tightening the suspense until breathing felt difficult. Jay stepped slightly in front of Mia without thinking, and Darren steadied his grip on the flashlight like it was the only real thing in the room. But then the shadow stopped. It didn't rush out or lunge toward them. It simply hovered behind the narrow gap, as though it knew exactly how much fear its presence alone could create. In the stillness, Mia realized something important. The markings they had seen weren't traps for them. The building didn't want to harm them. It was trying to contain whatever was inside that wall. And the distortions they'd witnessed weren't random. They were warnings. She took a careful step forward, raising her empty hand slightly. "It's not here to chase us," she whispered. "It's trying to leave." The idea felt impossible, but it made sense. The symbol burnt into the floor. The humming that rose and fell. The air shifts. The shimmering barriers. All of it was part of a containment system, one that was failing. The shadow behind the crack moved again, slower this time, almost like it was responding to Mia's calm voice. Then, in a movement so subtle they barely caught it, the crack sealed itself a fraction. The darkness behind it didn't vanish, but it retreated slightly, like the presence inside was pulling back. Jace froze. "Did it just listen to you?" Before she could answer, the floor beneath them trembled. A soft vibration at first, then stronger, radiating through the whole structure. Dust fell from the ceiling, forming a thin cloud around them. The walls groaned with a deep, hollow sound, as if the building was straining under its own weight. Darren grabbed Mia's arm. "We need to leave. Now." The trembling grew, shaking loose pieces of plaster and rattling the air vents. The crack widened again, not because the presence was forcing its way out, but because the building itself was collapsing. The containment system was failing completely, and whatever had been held here wasn't going to remain for much longer, even if it didn't want to escape violently. They sprinted toward the hallway, their steps echoing over the rumbling floor. The corridor they entered earlier had stretched unnaturally long, but now it seemed to snap back into place, shortening as the building twisted. They stumbled forward, relying on instinct more than sight, as the lights flickered above them and the hum roared back to life. The walls pulsed with faint energy, as though the building was trying to reset itself. Halfway down the corridor, the shimmering distortion appeared again, but this time it wasn't blocking their path. It hovered above the floor like a wavering shield, scattering their flashlight's beams. When they ran through it, the air felt cold and weightless, like stepping through a pocket of winter. They didn't stop to question it, they just kept running. When they rounded the last turn leading toward the exit, the shaking stopped abruptly. Everything went still. The lights steadied. The air warmed. It was as if the building exhaled. But something wasn't right. Mia sensed it before the others did. She slowed down and glanced back, expecting to see the distortion fading, and instead saw nothing but an empty hallway. The crack behind the chamber wall was gone, sealed completely, without a trace. No shadow. No shifting air. No humming. The building looked normal again. Too normal. They burst through the exit doors into the cold night air, gasping, coughing, trying to shake off the panic, still crawling under their skin. The sky above them was clear, the moon bright, the world outside untouched. It felt like they'd stepped out of one reality and into another. For a long moment, none of them spoke. They just stood there, catching their breath. Then Jace finally whispered, "We need to tell someone about this." Before Mia could answer, something strange happened. Behind them, the lights in the building flickered once, softly, almost politely, then glowed steady again. Mia stared at the windows, her heart sinking in her chest. The markings they'd seen inside earlier were now faintly visible through the glass, glowing with the same low light they'd seen on the floor. "It's still active," she murmured. "It didn't break. It reset." Darren wiped dust from his face, frowning. Reset for what? Or for who? Mia didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the faint symbols glowing behind the windows. They weren't fading, they were pulsing. Slow, steady, like a heartbeat. That wasn't the twist. The real twist came when Mia reached into her pocket, hoping to grab her phone, only to freeze. Her phone wasn't hers. The screen cracked slightly down one side, lit up without her touching it. A video was open, a recording none of them had taken. In the footage, the hallway was empty, but the camera moved as if held by an invisible hand. It walked toward the chamber, paused at the burned symbol on the floor, then slowly turned and pointed directly at the crack in the wall. The dark shape behind it moved into view, clearer than they'd ever seen. Large, tall, watching calmly, almost knowingly. And then, in a low whisper that didn't sound threatening, but sounded unmistakably aware, a voice came through the speaker. "You open the door. I won't forget you." The screen went black. Mia's breath caught. Jace stepped backward instinctively. Darren looked from the phone to the building, suddenly understanding the pulsing inside the windows. The containment system hadn't broken. It had chosen them. And whatever they'd seen inside wasn't trapped anymore. It was waiting. It knew their faces, their voices, their presence. The climax settled heavily, with the building silent behind them and the night growing unbearably still. The conflict was resolved, but now something else had awakened. Something patient, something watching, something that had followed them out. For a long moment, the three of them stood there in the cold night air, the silence stretching between them like a thin thread ready to snap. The building behind them didn't rumble or pulse or twist anymore. It just sat there quietly, like an ordinary structure on an ordinary night. But they all knew it wasn't ordinary anymore, not after what they had witnessed, and not after the voice that spoke through Mia's phone. The final twist still lingered in the air, settling into them slowly, making everything feel heavier and more real. Mia closed the phone with a shaky thumb, unsure what to do with it. It didn't feel like her phone anymore. It felt borrowed, touched by something that wasn't supposed to exist. She slipped it into her pocket because she didn't know what else to do, and for a while none of them moved. They just breathed, letting the night calm the rush of fear still in their bodies. The experience felt unreal, yet it had happened in front of their eyes. It left them questioning whether they should go back inside, call for help, or simply walk away and pretend this night had never happened. Eventually, Darren was the one who broke the silence. "Look, whatever that thing was, it didn't come after us." His voice was low, careful. Maybe it wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Mia nodded slowly. The shadow behind the crack hadn't lunged, hadn't tried to push through. It had simply watched, as if studying them. And the voice on the phone, unsettling as it was, hadn't sounded angry or violent. More curious, more aware, almost like it had been waiting for an opportunity to speak, not escape. Jace let out a long breath. But it said it wouldn't forget us. That doesn't sound like something that wants peace. Mia glanced at him. Or maybe it just means we're connected now. Not in a scary way, just in a way we don't understand yet. She didn't want to admit how uneasy the words made her feel, but deep inside she sensed something important. The presence in that chamber wasn't a monster. It wasn't a creature trying to break free. It was something that had been contained for a long time for reasons lost to history, and now it simply knew they existed. They walked away from the building slowly, each step bringing back a little more normalcy. Their breathing steadied. Their pulse slowed. The cool air grounded them again. They reached Darren's car and leaned against it, letting the quiet of the empty lot wash over them. The building behind them stayed calm, no flickering, no shifting shadows. It was finally still, as though it had completed whatever it needed to do. Jace rubbed his face, trying to clear the image of the shadow from his mind. Do we tell anyone? The police? Researchers? Someone. Mia shook her head gently. What would we say? That we saw a shadow trapped in a wall that can whisper through phones? Nobody would believe us. And even if they did, someone might try to force that thing out. Or worse, try to use it for something. The thought made all of them uneasy. Darren nodded. Maybe the safest thing is to leave it alone. Let the building stay locked. Let the containment do what it's supposed to do. Mia glanced at the structure again. It reset itself. Maybe it'll stay that way. Maybe we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She paused, feeling the phone in her pocket grow heavier, the memory of the voice lingering, or the right place, depending on how you see it. They stayed by the car for a long time, talking softly about what they had experienced. Each of them replayed the moments leading up to the climax, trying to make sense of the shifting hallways, the glowing symbols, the eerie cold, and the shadow that never stepped forward. They realized the building had been reacting to them in ways they didn't notice at first. Maybe it had guided them, nudged them, given them warnings when things became unstable. The keywords they came searching for, mystery, abandoned places, paranormal exploration, had turned into something real, something far deeper than a typical investigation. Eventually, they made a decision. They wouldn't upload anything from tonight. They wouldn't show the world the footage or the strange recordings. They wouldn't try to turn the experience into content. Some things they realized weren't meant for views or theories or online discussion. Some stories were meant to stay quiet, held privately between the people who lived them. The night grew colder, and they finally got into the car. Darren drove slowly at first, making sure none of them were too shaken to continue. Mia stared out the window, watching the building shrink in the distance. It looked peaceful now, almost harmless. Just a silhouette against the sky. No glow, no movement, no sign of the strange energy that had pulsed through it earlier. It was almost easy to believe they had imagined it all. But Mia knew they hadn't. As they reached the end of the long road leading out of the property, her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. Her breath caught, and she hesitated before pulling it out. The screen lit up with a simple notification. Battery low. Nothing else. No new message. No strange voice. She let out the breath she'd been holding, relieved and unsettled at the same time. The ride home stayed quiet, each of them lost in thought. The suspense of the night slowly faded into reflection. They wondered what the presence in the chamber had been, why it had listened to Mia, why it had whispered to them, and why the building's containment system had chosen this moment to reset after years of silence. Questions swirled, but none of them had answers. And strangely, they were okay with that. When they finally reached their neighborhood, they said their goodbyes quietly, not out of fear, but out of understanding. What they had experienced was theirs alone, something rare, something that changed them in ways they couldn't fully explain. They promised to keep in touch, to check on each other, to stay grounded after everything they had seen. Mia walked into her home, still feeling the cold of the building on her skin, but also feeling something else, a sense of closure. The story that began with curiosity and fear ended with awareness. She set her phone on her table, half expecting it to light up with another mysterious message, but it didn't. It stayed still, the cracked screen catching the soft glow of her lamp. She took a deep breath. For the first time since entering that strange place, she felt safe. Later that night, as she lay in bed, she reflected on everything. The abandoned hallway, the glowing symbols, the shifting paths, the shadow that watched but didn't harm. She realized the presence hadn't been malicious. It had been waiting for recognition, waiting to be acknowledged. And maybe, in some way she didn't fully understand, it had gotten what it needed. The containment had reset. The building was sealed again. The story was over. Just before she drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed once more. A soft, harmless vibration. She checked it with a steady breath. It was just an automatic update notification. She smiled faintly. Whatever had watched them was gone now. Or resting. Or simply finished. And as the night finally settled around her, Mia allowed herself to believe the simplest truth of all. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some adventures end not with fear, but with understanding. And some doors, once closed, are better left that way. The story had reached its end, quietly, naturally, and exactly as it was meant to.